everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Circles of Trust podcast. Before we get into anything today, this episode is going to deal with some subject matter that may be difficult for some people to have an honest conversation about. And that's not accusatory, just everyone has different levels of sensitivity. I want to start this off by saying I'm not going to give a pedigree of my qualifications to speak on any of these topics. I'm not going to try and justify anything in that nature. The only entitlement that any of us have to speak on these topics is that we love the properties involved. We think they have meaningful impact to people in our lives, and we feel it's important to discuss how we feel about it, regardless of how that gets viewed. There may be times where I attempt to not clarify, but perhaps restructure a statement made by one of my two guests here. Just know that I am not attempting to remove the agency of these people. I'm trying to ensure that their sentiment cannot be misinterpreted. Again, we are honest fans of these properties. We have no place for hatred in our already very complicated lives. And we're just here to have a good time and talk about things that make us laugh and sometimes piss us off. So with that understanding, welcome and hello. I am Connor, also Uriel5150. And as always, I am joined by
Miles Morales. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm DV.
We're starting off real early.
Sorry.
We are also joined off camera by a third person who will tag in from time to time to speak. For the purposes of anonymity, their voice will be modulated and their identity will not be disclosed. They have things to say about this topic, but they do not feel comfortable putting themselves out there, and that's perfectly understandable. This is a volatile topic. Frankly, I'm a little concerned about my own involvement, if I'm being perfectly honest, but there is no point in having these beliefs if I can't feel comfortable talking about them. So exactly. We're going to shoot right from the hip at something that's incredibly just topical. The topic of today, we're talking about representation, specifically in comics. There may be other examples that we draw upon for good or bad representation as we see it through our collective lens. It's not objective. That's just the opinions that we hold. But we're going to start off by talking about some new superheroes that are being unveiled in the Marvel lineup.
Yes. So there was an article on CBR.com that caught my attention last night. I was drifting off to sleep, and I always check my Google feed before I go to sleep. And this article just popped up. And I was like, whoa, what is this? So it's
CBR's comic book reader?
Yes.
Okay.
.com. Yes.
Okay.
So this particular thing, it's the headline says Marvel introduces 4 new transgender superheroes. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, I read this article and I said, you know what? I have to send this. So I sent it, and just go tell us how you feel about it. How do you feel about it? I know I have my thoughts, but we probably share the same
yeah,
thoughts.
I'm sure our sentiment is shared in a lot of these aspects. But I think a good place to start would be, why don't you go ahead and list off the names of the superheroes that are being unveiled?
Let's see if I can find those bad boys, because we have... Okay, so we have... The group includes Pity Girl. That's
P-I-T-Y girl.
/ Nora. That's her real name.
/ Nora, right?
That's her real name. She goes by she and her.
Okay.
So she has, you want me to say the abilities too as I go along?
We can go through that after.
Okay.
But I'd like the names first, because I think that kind of puts this whole thing in perspective.
Fair. So we have Pity Girl. We have Good Arson.
Good Arson. God damn.
We have Aphelion.
Spelled like affiliate? AFF?
APH.
Aphelion. Okay.
And we have face shopper.
Is it Aphelion or Aphelion? Yeah, it is Aphelion. Aphelion/read. They/them.
I was gonna say, I think it's a reference to Aphelion, which is a reference to like the point where the Earth is. I want to say it's either closest or farthest away from the sun.
Thanks, Copernicus.
So, though, that's the team that we have here.
Okay. So, again, I'm not going to caveat every single thing I say. Understand that I'm saying this from a place of love. I think it's awful representation to have your specifically transgender lineup specifically have Pity Girl, where if we go into the power that they possess, they have the power to say things that are so sad that the person is hypnotized into sleep. And in my head, again, this comic has not been released to the best of my knowledge, or it might have been released at this point, but we haven't seen it. But if I'm going to take a wild shot in the dark based on that power description, it sounds like they've made a character that just overshares and says really personal things that are upsetting, and the people that they say that to are lulled into sleep. That's kind of a weird power in general. Like, why, if it was just hypnotism, like the power of speech, but it's specifically sad things.
Sad things.
Pity
from this
girl.
description, it says she has the she has the ability to hypnotize people with sad stories, specifically with sad stories.
Sad stories. That's just a little bit upsetting from where I'm standing, because I feel like trans people are more than the sad stories that they have. I feel like every trans person has a story, but making the sad ones a superpower feels like it's empowering in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Like it's giving the wrong impression. I don't want to get too far on that, but Good Arson. Good Arson is they, them?
He, him.
He, him, beg your pardon.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good arson.
Good arson.
I just want to break down these two words.
Good arson.
Arson is a felony crime which involves setting fire to property with the intent to cause harm, financial or physical. That's not a good thing, like in any context. Like, you could say that, like, again, in a completely incomparable scenario, like a freedom person like burning down like an animal testing clinic or something after releasing the animals, sure, like maybe, right? There's like 3 examples I could think of that I'd be like, that's okay arson. I don't think I'd ever be like, damn, that's some good arson.
That's some good ass arson right there.
So I have to assume their power is setting shit on fire. Does it say what his power is?
It says they can ignite objects with their mind.
So it's pyrokinesis. Okay. Pyrokinesis is a sick ass power, but good arson. Again, the name, like the branding of that name is wild.
Yeah, it's.
Can you imagine a little kid being like, my favorite superhero is good arson?
They will be immediately arrested.
Yeah.
And put in a juvie.
Honestly, the person I identify most with in the comics I've read is good arson.
Oh gosh.
So again, this is a lot having to do with just how these characters are being presented. Honestly, it's very little to do with the fact that they're trans.
Yeah, like,
more the fact that it just feels like bad representation, which I guess is what most of this is about. It's about what we feel is improper representation.
Yes. And like, if I didn't read the headline and I just started to read the names and the powers, I would have.
You'd think it was a joke.
I would have sworn down that somebody is trolling. Like, they wrote this article to troll people.
Yeah,
because it sounds awful.
Honestly, it sounds like something you would read on like Cracked or something like that, like a spoof Onion-esque article about comics.
Yep.
We're about to get a really bad joke.
So I was trying to look up to see more information about good arson, and so I started typing into search, like, good arson Marvel, and before I get to Marvel, it came up with good snacks for arsonists. And I was like, there's no way there's an entire article dedicated to this. So apparently it's from a New York Times crossword puzzle, and it was a question answer thing. So it's like, what's a good snack for an arsonist?
Marshmallow.
Firecrackers.
Jesus Christ. Hey, you delivered. That is a bad joke.
That is.
Good snacks for arsonists. So aphelion.
Yes.
I'm not. Does it say what? That's they them.
They them.
They them.
They them.
What is aphelion's power? Does it say? One of them had like a really busted power. I think.
I mean, this one is just it has freezing powers, so it's like Iceman type shit.
Ice powers.
Yeah, it's free stuff. So it's Sub-Zero.
Okay,
That
gotcha.
makes sense.
So our off-camera guest has clarified aphelion refers to specifically the point furthest away from the sun, which would be very cold, which makes sense for a person with cold powers. Never mind. I'm wrong on science. I've been corrected. Aphelion refers to what is summer for us in the northern hemisphere.
But they have freeze powers. So
But they have freeze powers.
They're Sub-Zero / Iceman /
Well, then maybe they're not from the northern hemisphere. Anyways, that seems pretty okay. I don't have any like dig with that. Freeze powers is cool.
Freeze powers are literally cool.
Hey, we're gonna get into some cool puns here in a little bit.
But that power is so normal.
Yeah,
like that's just regular. So
to be fair, the power to set things on fire with your mind is also incredibly normal.
It really is.
What's not is referring to yourself as good arson.
Yes. So the last person that we have on here was what? Face Shopper? Face Shopper. I think that's how it's.
Is it Face Shopper or Face Hopper?
I think it's Face Shopper because it's face and then shopper.
Okay, yeah. Face Shopper.
Yeah. So
Soph and then
and she her.
She her. Okay. And so this person has the ability to change their appearance.
They can shapeshift into items that they deem cool.
Items that they deem cool.
So, like, yo, that handbag is on point. Turn into a handbag.
This might be a knee-jerk reaction, but to me that sounds like self-objectification.
I mean, look,
like very literally, it sounds like someone objectifying themselves.
Bruh. It says, who can shapeshift into items she deems cool. So whatever she deems the latest trend fashion out there, she can just say, I like those stilettos. I'm stilettos now.
You couldn't even have like a cool arc where she goes to transform into something and she transforms into herself because she thinks that she's cool. No. Because then she would also have to classify herself as an item. So like there's no uplifting arc there.
I wondered like how I would want, like, you know how they show people who get new powers and they don't know how they work yet?
Yeah.
I would love to see a blooper reel of her like, oh, your toothbrush is this shit. And then you just turn into a fucking toothbrush. Or like, man, oh, your dog is so cute. And then she just pop and turn into a damn dog. Okay. I would love that.
That's actually, yeah, that's sick. I like that.
That would be great. But I need it to be animated by the people who did the Harley Quinn show. Because their style and comedy is perfection.
The level of cartoonishness. I know it's a cartoon, but it's the expansion of the cartoonishness is really important.
So to be honest, out of all of the characters, I would want to see her do stuff. Like I want to see how her power actually works.
Yeah, the blurb there may not be that accurate.
Yes.
So like there could be some nuance to that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Like she may not be able to do like maybe only inanimate objects or maybe only living objects. Like you never know what she could turn into.
So of these two, 50% of them seem pretty dog shit.
Yeah, the pity girl is pretty trash, and Good Arson's name is pretty trash.
Yeah, the power's really generic, but again, the fucking brand, Good Arson. That just so saying that it's a very literal oxymoron. You cannot have good arson.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
We have it coming out soon, or it may already be out.
Yeah,
but
my new superhero name is Legal Crime. That's my new hero idea. I'm pitching to Marvel.
Dog, that'll work.
So yeah, just to clarify, very little to do with them being trans. More about like how their powers interact in a negative light towards their transness, if that makes any sense. Because again, the pity girl being trans specifically feels really weird. For like, there's something there that just like sticks in my head, and I'm like, this feels negative. Again, I could be wrong, but it's never going to make me want to pick up one of these fucking.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
like, not at all.
If this is the best their marketing can do, then yeah.
I would read like on Free Comic Day. I would grab one so that I could see what Face Shopper will change into, like how her powers work. That's the most interesting thing, about this.
You know, what would be a genuinely much better name for Pity Girl?
What's that?
Therapist.
Do it. Pitch it.
Tell me that's not awesome.
Pitch it.
Right? Because they're clearly like anyways.
Pitch it.
So that's where we wanted to start off with, to give you guys a little taste of the kind of bullshit we're talking about today. Yes. Again, 50% of those heroes seem cool, but the fact that they're packaged, it's saying that it's like, look at these characters because they're trans and not because they're doing anything particularly interesting.
Yeah.
It feels kind of overdone.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
I'd like to see a trans hero that is just doing rad shit.
Exactly.
Which Face Shopper does seem like there's potential for some cool shenanigans. She's
gonna be the one that I look out for just because of her power.
For sure.
Seems pretty cool.
So jumping from here, I think we're going to talk about probably the greatest hero that Marvel's created in their entire run. Someone who was both necessary, needed, and brought a voice to a voiceless minority. We're speaking, of course, about Miles Morales.
Yes, Miles Morales. So I want to start this off. Before we get into it, I want people out there to understand I am a huge Spider-Man fan. I've been reading Spider-Man probably since the late 80s.
Let's get a look at that shirt.
Oh yeah, I'm actually wearing a Spider-Man shirt. I have lots of Spider-Man shirts, and I have lots of Spider-Man memorabilia and comics and all types of stuff that I've had throughout the years. So Spider-Man was the first Marvel comic that I read. I used to be like, growing up, like when I was a little dude, DC was like where it was at. Like Batman and Superman, they were killing it. The Flash, I have a Shazam shirt. I'm seeing way back in some pictures as a little kid. I have a Shazam shirt, all types of stuff. Spider-Man was the first Marvel comic that I read, and he was the one that put me on to Marvel as a whole. And I related to him because he was young. He didn't necessarily want his powers, and he lived in a fucked up place. He didn't know where his parents were. He was raised by his aunt. He lived in the ghetto pretty much. Like he didn't live in a nice place. He pretty much lived in the ghetto. And it was like, his villains were cool. Spider-Man embodied everything as a kid that I loved. Like, he was just like me, and it didn't matter about the color of his skin, because when he put on the goddamn suit and he's saving people, you can't tell who he is. So we fast forward some years, and they come out with the Ultimate series.
Several years, matter of fact.
Yeah, it's
like
a bunch.
40 years.
It's a bunch. They come out with the Ultimate series of comics. So they pretty much, almost like the New 52 in DC, like they just kind of rebranded everybody, shuffled everything around, gave people new origin stories. Well, not all new, but they were tweaked origin stories.
Right.
And throughout that time, they kind of took Parker into some weird stuff. Whatever, it's comics, especially in the 90s. Good God.
The 90s
oh my God. 90s was weird. So
yeah.
We go through the Ultimate section, and we have a Black Nick Fury and stuff like that, inspired by the actual person who created this Black Nick Fury said, Sam Jackson is definitely my inspiration. So when they got him to play him, it was cool.
Yep.
So we get to Miles Morales in 2011. And I remember people were telling me like, yo, D, they turning your boy black. And I'm like, what do you mean they turning him black? Like they put in a machine and now his superpower is that he's black.
They reversed Michael Jackson.
Yeah, with like Uncle Ruckus used to say. Uncle Ruckus, my man. So
Uncle Ruckus is great.
So I dive into it. I look into it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's black and Hispanic. Okay. What does he do? Oh, he does everything that Parker does.
Everything.
They added a couple extra things because they had to. Like they couldn't just have an exact clone of Parker. We already did the clone saga. We did it twice actually.
Yep.
So we already have all of that. So we get to a point where Miles debuts. So I reluctantly read his stuff. And it's pretty much like I thought it was going to be. It's not as bad as what we're going to talk about a little later.
Yeah.
But
honestly, being able to look at that image, it really sets the tone.
It does. It does. And it's making me, as I'm saying these words to our audience, looking at this picture just burns me up as I'm talking. So I'm trying not to get super upset because we've already talked before we got on camera. So
I didn't even notice the lightning bolt.
It's a damn lightning bolt. It's a lightning bolt, bruh.
That's really good.
So Miles, in my mind, when I was reading this, Miles was created to replace Spider-Man. And as I read it, that's pretty much what happened. So we're going to get into other things now, but I just wanted to start that out to show how this makes me feel as a massive Spider-Man nerd to see your favorite character be changed. Well, a new character come out that has the same everything as him, and kind of your main dude is kind of pushed to the side.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to start off with that.
In doing all of this research, I say all this research like we haven't just been researching since like noon today.
It's easy to find.
Yeah. We came across a couple of articles. And by we, I mean DV came across a couple of articles and then he sent them to me. And there were moments I was reading and I genuinely, like, I audibly gasped because I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I actually screenshotted it and sent it to DV and he was like, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. So I'm going to pull up a couple of excerpts. But basically there were two articles that he sent. And the first one was talking about generally from an industry standard, the impact of Miles Morales and where he was heading, because this was before Into the Spider-Verse released. And the second article was an interview with Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah,
who
created
He
created Miles.
Yeah,
he was the one who,
and he had been writing for Spider-Man for ever.
Yeah, some time.
Like I think 2 decades, something like that.
Yeah,
he came into Marvel when they were in the process of being in chapter, I forget what chapter, but they were in bankruptcy.
Yeah,
they were having to sell off office supplies and downsize their staff and everything.
And sell off characters. Like they sold off characters to other companies that just gave them the rights to do it. Like that's how Sony got Spider-Man.
It's true.
They're in that era.
So the first article wasn't it was just interesting. It was talking, it was a lot of different voices in the industry saying like why Miles was important and why it was necessary for him to have been created.
Yes.
And the quotes that I was seeing were the one that stands out to me, the one that made me shocked, was they were saying that the general consensus amongst their peers was that the nature of Parker's existence, i.e., his parents were gone, he was being raised by extended family, he was low income in a rough area. They were like, it makes sense that this character is black. And I genuinely reread that line like 2 or 3 times because it was like,
Damn it.
they're saying this, like they're saying, and like nobody's like doing a little thing, and like that's really, really offensive as a stereotype, saying that like this character should be black because they are low income, because their parents are not present, because they live in this rough area.
Yep, 100%.
And
man.
that's a really, again, I don't see how that's a justifiable statement. Because that takes away.
And these are like important people.
Yeah. This was not
him.
Correct.
Like this is Miles' like core group of people who put him out in the world, man.
The people who helped design him, helped write, helped illustrate. And they're like, yeah, it, like when we were reading and writing Spider-Man, we were like, yeah, his character should be black based on everything that we know about him.
So let's just make him black.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, forget all the stuff he's, the fact that Parker is not. Let's just make him black because he needs to be.
Right, because it makes sense because he's poor and because he lives in a rough area of New York and because his parents aren't present. This character should be black.
It's awful.
The gravity of that statement, like, I feel burdened by that knowledge.
It's
Genuinely,
so awful.
there's a weight on my shoulders from having read that sentence.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's an insane thing. It'd be one thing if you're like, I wish that there was better representation for the realities of living in the inner city. That's an okay sentence. Saying this white character should be black because it doesn't make sense that a white guy is poor in a low income neighborhood with no parents.
So jacked
That's
up.
a very different sentence.
It's jacked up.
I genuinely don't know how else to reiterate that. That's fucking wild.
It is. And these are statements that I saw recently. So growing up, like reading Miles, I'm like, why does he exist? Like, why does he actually exist? Because I'm like, okay, well, maybe they're going to introduce some new villains. So just real quick.
Boy.
I have a few.
You've got a couple paragraphs.
Oh, trust me, bro.
Real quick. He's like, scroll.
So I just want to let you guys know out here, guys and ladies, just a few villains that are present in the Miles Morales. Like, Parker is gone. Like, he's...
Yeah, so just, again, spoiler alert for the history of comics. The way this works is there's an alternate Spider-Man. Peter Parker dies a hero in that saving Aunt May.
Yep.
And then Miles Morales takes up that mantle and has his own run of comics and then gets transported into the normal timeline.
Yes.
From my understanding.
Yes.
So
this dude he's pretty much copy and paste Peter Parker. And it makes me wonder, why the hell does he even exist? So he fights Scorpion. Like these are I'm going through the list of just a bunch of them that I know.
Some of his nemesis.
So Scorpion.
Okay.
There's a group called Cradle.
Yep.
Raxon Corp pretty much is Oscorp. It's fucking Oscorp.
Mm-hmm.
It's Oscorp.
It's the same,
man. Oscorp just doesn't exist in here because of the whole thing with Norman Osborn. Like his company is gone.
Correct.
So Roxxon is replacement. Mysterio, Venom, Prowler. Now I had to stop here at the Prowler.
Okay.
So Prowler, originally he's black. He's black in the original comics.
Oh, okay.
He's originally black.
Okay.
He's been a black man. But what they had to do, they were like, ooh, we gonna do a twist. We gonna make him Miles's uncle. Yeah, we gonna do that. So they changed it so that people can't say, oh, it's not the same Prowler. It's still the goddamn Prowler. He wears pretty much the same outfit. He takes the cape off. He doesn't have a cape, but it's still the Prowler. He has the same basic outfit. So we have Silum. Silum is an original Miles character, but he comes through. He's from the area where the other clones are. So Miles also goes through a clone saga. He goes through a Clone Saga.
So he goes through the same arcs too. It's not just the villains. The arcs are the same.
A lot of the same arcs. Not every arc is the same, but he goes through a lot of them.
7.
He fights Doctor Doom. Crossbones, that's a Cap villain.
Yeah.
100% Cap villain. Hammerhead, that is a classic Spider-Man villain. Like, I'm talking about back in the
Vintage.
60s
For sure.
comic book villain. Rhino. And he fights the original Hobgoblin, man. Parker hasn't fought the original Hobgoblin in forever. It's been multiple people that have been the Hobgoblin.
Yeah. He fights the original.
He fights the OG one, the old Roderick Kingsley. He fights the original one.
Wow.
And because how I remember this because when I bought 3 comics from Miles Morales back in 2015, I think it was. And I bought them specifically for the villains.
Okay.
So I was like, whatever villain I want to see how he interacts with the villains if he does it better than Parker does. The way they wrote him, he doesn't necessarily, but since he has the invisibility power and like the energy blasts, he has an advantage over Parker. So it kind of makes Parker, they almost did the Star Wars effect where they break your character down to build another one up. Okay. So it made Parker look weak because it took Parker X amount of tries to defeat this person when Miles goes in there and
crushes
because he has these extra powers. He's not as physically strong as Parker. He just has the invisibility. He has spider-like powers. So just imagine Parker with his strength, just straight strength, turn down a notch, but bump up like you know how they have the little sliders, and you can bump up his like give him the invisibility power and give him some electro shock stuff. But he's not physically as strong as Parker. Like Parker can lift more than he can. Okay. Parker can take more damage than Miles. But Miles has the advantage because no other villain has ever faced a Spider-Man that has a power set like his.
Right.
So it makes our beloved Peter Parker, who invented all his shit, who sat down, created things to outsmart his villains, it made him look like a chump when he fought these villains.
To be clear, you're saying that Miles Morales does not create the powers that he's utilizing, the electroshock bit.
Oh no,
that's, the invisibility.
That's him. That's physically
that's an
in
innate
him.
Thing
that's in him. That's in him.
Jesus Christ.
So Parker has all the spider powers.
And he built things specifically to utilize his weaknesses, like to uplift himself so he wasn't as vulnerable.
Yes. And like the web shooters and stuff, that's all his creation. He actually helped Miles. Like there were moments where they teamed up. He helped Miles understand how to make them for himself. And there were certain points where he would actually provide them for him. Like, hey, we're about to go fight Electro. I'm going to give you some webbing that will help out with that. That type of stuff. Parker was a mentor to him at some point. So usually when they have mentor characters, that mentor is going to be gone. And then they push the new sexy out there. So as a huge Spider-Man fan, a Peter Parker fan, I should say, it really hurt to read that. And I didn't even care that Miles was black or black and Hispanic. I cared that they were replacing Peter Parker. Peter Parker is a staple in Marvel Comics. He is the he's the most popular superhero that Marvel has. He sells well. He's been selling well since the 60s. Parker is the man. And then you just automatically just replace him, give him a very similar overarching everything.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And just change his ethnicity.
His arc, the ones that I saw, because in those articles, they outlined arcs that had offended fans. Mm-hmm. That they were like, these are upsetting. And a common complaint was that they were too samey, or that they made him seem so incredibly overpowered compared to Peter Parker.
Yes, and also in the game. So have you played the Miles Morales game?
I have not. I heard it was good though.
It is, because it's exactly how Miles is in the comics. He's a copy and paste. This is DLC pretty much of the original Spider-Man game, you know, the Insomniac one that came out. So in this game, you get to use Miles's powers.
And chief among those powers is the exaggerated swagger of a black teen, correct?
Believe it or not, Into the Spider-Verse and the Miles Morales game are my favorite iterations of Miles, because they don't overly do the I'm a black cool teen. They don't overdo it.
Are you familiar with the review of the Miles Morales game where the reviewer says that exact line?
Really?
Yeah, he go. I'm sure I can find it. I'll show it to you later. But I believe he's an African American reviewer. He's like, my favorite part about playing as Miles Morales is he fights with the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
Oh,
and it's like really dry, like how he delivers it. It's very funny. It got memed for months.
So I don't think that. Okay, so Spider-Man in general has a specific attitude.
For sure.
He always has.
He's always been kind of a smartass.
Yes.
Not like a... People think that Deadpool's a smartass. Deadpool's just a psychopath.
He is a psychopath.
Spider-Man is a smartass. He always has like little quips and little barbs here and there.
Yes.
He's always trying to like... He's not afraid to show his ass.
That's correct. And with the Miles in the game, they really... They talk, since his mom is the one that's in the story, you know, he's living with his mom at the time, because, you know, spoiler alert, if you haven't played the first Spider-Man game, Miles' dad dies in that game.
Shit.
Yeah. So that's why I said spoiler alert.
Anyways, next.
So Miles is living with his mom in this game, but they don't emphasize the fact that he's black. It's more, the Latino side is more of what you see because the mother is alive.
Oh.
So you see more of his Latino side, and his mom is speaking Spanish and English the entire time. Like, she'll break and he'll respond to her, and it's fine.
That's cool.
That feels genuine.
Organic. Yeah.
It feels genuine, unlike some of the stuff that we're going to talk about later. But we didn't necessarily need Miles. Like, as a black youth growing up reading this shit, I never said, you know what? I wish Peter Parker was black, because I can't see myself in anything that he does, because he doesn't look exactly like me.
And I want to touch on the fact that that's a sentiment that you have shared, I think, since I've known you. Like, since we've talked about Spider-Man, you're like, I was always able to identify with Spider-Man, and it had nothing to do with his race.
A damn thing, because the dude he will sacrifice his life for people that he loves. He will make the tough decisions. The first Spider-Man game, goddamn, the choice that he had to make at the very end. I don't know if we want to spoil it or not, but
which Spider-Man game?
The PS4.
PS4 one?
Yep, PS4 one.
Fuck it, I'll put up a spoiler screen.
Okay, so in there is a disease that's going around, and Aunt May gets sick. He only has one cure. It's either recreate it for the rest of the world or save Aunt May. And he decides to give it to the rest of the world, and Aunt May dies. Do you think fucking Miles Morales would put him in a position to do anything that fucking heroic?
Wow.
No. That's the shit that Parker has been doing since the 60s, bro. And to push him to the side for this it's a spit in the face to kids and adults that grew up and read his stuff. Parker is one of the greatest heroes, not only because he has cool powers and cool suits. He's just a good human being.
Peter Parker is heroic in his own way.
Peter Parker was picked on, he was spit on, he was beat up, he was like, he didn't have any money, but he still would sacrifice his last dime and his last breath for the city and the people that he loves.
He's
and
the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
He is. And that's why he's my dude, not because he looks like me.
But according to these articles, that's why Miles Morales needed to be created, because people had trouble identifying with Spider-Man because he did not look like them. That's an almost verbatim quote from these articles that I was reading from people who were involved in the creation of Miles Morales.
Yes.
Stating that it was difficult for people to relate to Peter Parker and to Spider-Man because of his race, which is wild.
It is disheartening. It really is.
Because there's data to back it up, but there's a reason that Spider-Man is so incredibly popular and always has been. And it's because of his relatability. He's just a guy.
He's just a dude.
He's a guy that makes hard choices. He's put in tough situations.
He has women problems. Every man can relate to that, especially growing up. You know, there's a girl that you like that's definitely out of your league. You know, we all go through that, dude. There's nothing about Spider-Man besides the fact that he's a superhero that we can't relate to as human beings.
Point of order. There's never been a woman that's out of my league.
Hey,
ever.
But hey, you are Miles Morales then. I'm pretty sure he gets all the bitches.
I was gonna say, does Miles ever go through like relationship problems?
He does. He does, and they allude to it in Into the Spider-Verse. I like how they introduced how they showed his awkwardness towards like Gwen when he first met Gwen. But at the same time, when you watch that, you know it's about to happen. Like Miles is about to get pushed to the side also after pushing Parker to the side, because I'm pretty sure, and you could quote me on this right now, y'all. I believe that Spider-Gwen is going to be a big focus in the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse. I think she is going to be.
Didn't that already come out?
The second one hasn't come out yet.
Oh.
The first one, has been out for a couple years.
I thought the second one, I guess I've just seen trailers.
Yeah, the trailers are out for it, but
because they do seem to focus on her quite a lot, don't they? Yeah.
And it's as soon as she was introduced into the Spider-Verse, it was the Gwen show. Like, it really was a lot. And he was following her around like a little sick puppy, like, Gwen, where's Gwen? Oh,
so it's like,
you, Gwen. And he did the, hey, that bullshit, I mean, it's funny, but it's because it's Gwen, and now she's like the main thing.
Parallel for this would be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Doctor Strange and America Chavez, where he just kind of follows her around and lets her, take charge.
The ex-Sorcerer Supreme was following some.
Well, canonically, he couldn't have been the Sorcerer Supreme because he never read the book that the Sorcerer Supreme get. So canonically, he was never the Sorcerer Supreme. I think we've talked about this.
Oh God! So that's how I feel about Miles, and I'll repeat, my favorite representations of Miles are definitely the game and Into the Spider-Verse. Like, those are fine. I can deal with those. So anything else you want to add to that? I don't know how much you know about Miles, or if you've looked into Miles besides, what we've.
I don't, frankly. All I really know about Miles is, for a period of time, I worked at a comic book shop. And while I worked at that comic book shop, I helped with the comic pull list. And if you're not familiar with comic pull lists and things like that, basically some stores, a lot of stores, most stores, I'd say, they deal with comic books. They have what's called a pull list, and you give the shop a list of the titles that you want pulled whenever they do their comic orders, and then they will give you those issues as they come out. They'll hold them for you weekly, and they charge you. Usually there's like a discounted rate involved, varies from store to store. But while I worked for this store, I helped with the comic pulls, and something that I noticed was that there were people who would get Spider-Man, and in parentheses next to it, it would say all. There'd be a lot of titles that would say all. So they wanted anything that featured that character. I'd say almost more than half of the ones that said Spider-Man all, they would say all except Miles Morales. Yeah. You'd have Superman, all. Batman, all. Spider-Man, all except for MM. And he just wasn't popular compared to the people who were expecting a Peter Parker story.
Yes.
And again, there's not enough about Miles that sets him apart.
Nope.
In his story.
Nope.
I mean, his only qualifier for being different seems to be that he's a different race than Peter Parker. And that, for most people who are fans of the comics, is just not sufficient.
I don't care about that, bro.
Yeah.
I like, dude, when I was reading DC comics, the Martian Manhunter was my dude.
Martian Manhunter fucking rocks.
And he's a fucking alien.
He's an alien.
Green. I don't give a damn about if he was representing a black man. I don't care about that shit. Give me good characters, good stories, and cool powers. And even if they're weird powers, as long as you use them in cool ways.
Mr. Plastic is a weird motherfucker, but I'll be goddamned if he's not entertaining every time he shows up.
Kite Man.
Kite Man.
Kite Man. He's a fucking man.
He's just a kite man.
And he's in Harley Quinn show, he's the best. It's the best representation in there because he's hilarious. But even outside of that, he's fine. He's just a villain.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what color you are as long as you're interesting. And Miles isn't interesting because he's just Peter Parker, or what my man Eric D. July, he dubbed him Peter Darker.
Wow.
So that's really, like, honestly, that's what he is. And it hurts to say that because I would want to embrace all variations of Spider-Man. But when you bring those, like Ben Reilly is a dope Spider-Man. Scarlet Spider, god damn, Scarlet Spider is the shit. But they didn't try to replace him. He would substitute in when Parker was injured or missing, like when he got sucked into the dimension with Madam Web and all that bullshit.
But he was never trying to oust Peter Parker.
Correct.
And I think it calls back to a quote that I've used on here before. It is not enough that I should succeed. Others must also fail.
Yep.
And if your way of uplifting your new superhero is to tear down an old one, maybe there wasn't room for this version of the superhero you were trying to introduce. Maybe the idea was flawed in its conception, and maybe there was a better way to represent the idea that you want to get across.
Yep. If they would have waited for Parker to get like super old and then introduce Miles and then have like a Batman Beyond type dynamic.
Oh my God. That's why Batman Beyond is so fucking cool.
Yes. I would have been okay with that.
Yeah.
Because Parker is to the point where he's old, even though in the comics nobody really ages.
Right.
But if they would have told a story like that and it happened to be Miles that got those powers by whatever means, I would have been okay with that because Parker would have been there to be a mentor instead of dying.
In my head, I can already imagine like the 4 origin panels. All right. Panel 1, Miles Morales. He's on a school field trip with his friends. They're going to whatever fucking whatever laboratories.
Raxon.
Right? Yep. Panel 2, gets bitten. Panel 3, he starts fucking around with some of his powers in the neighborhood. Panel 4, knock on his door, and there's an older Peter Parker with like glasses and looks like a professor. Be like, hey, I noticed you've been missing from school recently. We need to talk. And like, boom, you go. It's there. The whole thing is there.
Done.
Like you have an introduction, you have a passing of the torch, you have an understanding of like what's going on. Instead, you're just like, let's kill off Spider-Man.
Yep.
Literally kill him off. And let's replace him with the Spider-Man that brings an insufficient story to the table. A story that we've already heard. And again, the only qualifier for his existence is that the people who made him thought that people couldn't relate to Spider-Man because Spider-Man is not black.
And it's crazy that they think that way when he's the
most relatable
and like the number one hero. Like,
yeah,
like you said, when people want a Spider-Man comic, they put in no Miles Morales. No, we don't want that shit. It doesn't sell.
And you have to understand, how many different runs of Spider-Man there are at any given point in time.
Oh yeah,
because they do like one shots and they
spectacular, amazing, ultimate, all these different versions. Even the kiddified one.
They would do the Ben Reilly comics too, because they had a Scarlet Spider run. They would get Spider Gwen, right? Damn. No issue with that, but it was just the Miles Morales stuff. Just it wasn't good. It wasn't enough for them.
And
to their credit, a lot of them they started off as alls and then they would change to all except for MM.
Damn.
Like they would get it and they're like, I'm gonna go and cancel on this run. It's just not really like speaking to me. And it's
Now if Miles, I don't even think if Miles would have come out when I was super young reading these, it would have made a difference because where I lived, if you read comic books, you were considered a nerd, and they don't like nerds. So this was late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So that's not what you did. So even if I was chilling with the Miles Morales comic, I don't think the dudes out there would have been like, "Oh, we ain't gonna beat him up today,"
because he likes the black Spider-Man.
Man,
yeah, I guess that'd be an interesting survey. Like if you read Luke Cage comics growing up, did you still get the shit kicked out of you for being a nerd?
Yes, I would have.
Yeah,
I would have gotten the shit kicked out of me. The only thing that saved me that I did that people didn't bother me was video games, and it was specifically Madden.
Yeah.
So when
I've worked at a GameStop before, yeah.
In the hood, if you play Madden, you're right. Good.
But
if they catch you playing anything other than Madden or NBA Live or whatever, they whoop your ass.
Is that Super Smash Brothers?
Yep. Exactly. So Miles wouldn't have saved me back then either. So I don't know. So do you want to
address the elephant on the screen?
Do you want to?
So a lot of this conversation started when DV brought to our group chat's attention the existence of a new Miles Morales run. And in recent Marvel history, the What If series has been extraordinarily popular, featuring
we got a TV show.
Right, it has its own TV show on Disney Plus, which it's okay.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's nothing crazy.
Some stories were pretty cool.
Yeah, there was cool aspects to all the stories, but some of them were just better than others.
Yep.
But the What If concept is essentially they're swapping out different characters for different heroes. So, for instance, you could have like a What If Captain America, where Peggy Carter becomes the super soldier instead of Captain America. Or a What If
they had T'Challa.
Yeah, T'Challa was
Guardian.
Yes,
instead of Star-Lord.
So what if T'Challa was Star-Lord?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of characters that were swapped around in that was really cool. I would recommend watching the What If series. It's a nice little series. It's entertaining. And frankly, that's what things should be. Well, recently, there's been a comic run featuring Miles Morales. It's What If Miles Morales, and it's where he's becoming different superheroes. And the one that has garnered a great deal of outrage and just general upsettedness. What if Miles Morales became Thor? And I will try and intersperse some of these images over the video later. We'll see how successful that is. But we're just going to describe some of these panels. So DV did a really good job in just sending us panels that were inflammatory, for lack of a better word. But the first page of the comic opens with Miles Morales Thor with the fuckboy haircut with a lightning shaved into the side of his head. And he's putting on Jordans, but instead of Jordans, they've got a Thor with a swoosh behind him.
Yeah.
A Mjolnir with the swoosh behind him. Oh yeah, that's the panel. That's the one.
Good God.
Okay, so Asgard, and the concept here is that the Yggdrasil, the World Tree, sprouted in Brooklyn instead of in Asgard, but they're calling Brooklyn Asgard, which is weird because that's not how the realms work. If you watched last week's episode, we talked about the 9 realms in Norse mythology. And if I'm really good, I could remember all of them now. So I'm going to try. You've got Midgard, which is Earth. You've got Asgard, which is the realm of the Norse gods. You've got Valheim. No, Vanaheim, which is the realm of the Vanir gods. You've got Alfheim, which is the realm of the elves. You've got Jotunheim, which is the realm of the giants. You've got Svartalfheim, which is the realm of the dwarves. You've got Niflheim, which is where the fog lives. You've got Muspelheim, which is the realm of fire. And you've got Helheim, which is the frozen depths of hell. Fuck yeah, I got it off the top of my head now.
That's what I'm talking about.
The way it's portrayed in this comic is that Midgard is Asgard, which is not how the Norse realms work. But whatever, because in the Marvel movies, they're kind of doing this thing where they're moving where Asgard is. Whatever.
Asgard is where the people are.
Asgard is where the people are. Yeah, well, apparently Asgard is where the fucking shoes hang off of the power lines.
Yes, that's it. And where graffiti is all over the fucking place.
It's genuinely stunning how many stereotypes are fit into one.
One panel.
This is one panel and then the 2 pages. Because he's walking down the streets of Brooklyn Guard. And there's literally like sneakers hanging off of a power line, and there's graffiti on fucking everything. There's like
the tops of buildings. That's
right. There's no building. How the fuck are you gonna get out there? Genuine. Like, are the Valkyries tagging it?
It must be. Like, this motherfucker it's a car, but it's a chariot all at the same time. God. Did you notice that shit?
No.
I pointed that out to one of my homeboys. Look at that.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a straight up just like.
My bad.
No, you're fine. That's like the half of like a Bentley.
Yeah, it is.
And it's being drawn by a goat.
By a damn goat.
It's true. It's true.
It's a ram. It's a ram.
It's a ram.
It's a ram.
And so he's walking down the streets of what is supposed to be Asgard. Or Brooklyn, Asgard. And I swear to God, it's covered in graffiti.
It is,
right?
Yo.
And like, it's one thing to be like, this is how art is depicted, right? Like, that's how they express themselves. But it's clearly like, the way it's done, it looks just like vandalism. Which is like, if there was like cool murals, because you know how like there's like graffiti murals and stuff. Like, if it was like that style, I think it would be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
This definitely looks like if you've ever been to DC or LA, or it looks like that. It just looks just graffiti everywhere.
And like a lot of it's not good. A lot of it's just like squiggles.
Oh yeah. It looks terrible.
Yeah.
It looks terrible.
So it's, him walking around, and then, he's got a Valkyrie girlfriend, or is that just it's Sif, isn't it?
It's
Sif.
Yeah, I think that's Sif.
But she looks like a Valkyrie. But that's fine, whatever. And then his uncle Loki shows up.
His Uncle Loki.
Uncle Loki.
This one right here.
I wouldn't be much of a god of mischief if I couldn't prowl my way into a room.
It's so awful. It's so bad.
Okay. And then he's like, word, let's bounce. That's not me being racist. That's what the comic says.
That's what it says, man. That's what it says.
So then he calls Mjolnir to himself and says, hammer time. And the hammer is covered
in graffiti.
Like covered.
So okay, I this right here, this part right here, what is one of the panels that really got me.
Yeah.
And it says a lot, because when you look at the hammer with the graffiti on it, it reminds me of growing up in the hood, because they would bring new stuff. Like, we would get a new basketball goal. Like, we've been playing with the raggedy ass basketball goal all this time. They spend the money, they put a brand new one at the rec center, and the first thing they do is slap fucking graffiti on it and cut the nets and all this stuff. It's like, if you want us to be better, you shouldn't depict us being worse.
They're romanticizing the negative aspects of living in that environment.
Why couldn't he just have the hammer?
I mean,
just chilling.
Like the hammer normally, not normally, but like the hammer that we're used to, the Mjolnir we're used to, has like Celtic knots and runes along it, which are like a very traditional Norse symbol. What would stop you from having like and again, forgive me for being insensitive, but like tribal patterns on the side of it. Like it could have engravings that were
He's got the goddamn tattoos.
I was gonna say he's got the tattoo.
He's got the tattoos.
So having that pattern on the hammer would be kind of a cool tie-in there.
It would have been fine.
His tattoo looks cool as hell.
And to be honest, the outfit itself isn't awful.
I
hate the Jordans.
The Jordans are rough.
The sneakers, I hate those. But everything else is fine. Okay. I'm okay with it, except the fuckboy haircut.
Yeah. His costume design's not bad. So we're gonna talk about Odin real quick.
Oh,
so
man.
there's a couple things about Odin that are important to talk about in this universe.
Yes.
Odin is bald, which I don't have a problem with.
Nope.
Except for the fact that about 7 or so panels from now, as an exclamation, Miles Morales says, "By Odin's sick fade." Does he say sick fade?
I think it's just Odin's fade. By Odin's fade.
It might be by his sick fade. Okay, so just to clarify what just happened there. There's a panel that DV had shown me earlier in which Miles Morales Thor says, "By Odin's fade," referring to the fade hairstyle. Odin in this comic is bald, and so I was really upset that happened. That he said "by Odin's fade" because this Odin has a really magnificent beard, and the oath is typically "by Odin's beard" or "by Odin's missing eye" or whatever. Both of which are traits that this Odin has, but he specifically in that panel he showed me says "by Odin's fade." We're looking at the online version of the comic available through Kindle, and we can't find that panel.
But it is.
But it's legit. But it was in the article.
When you go to, you can look at screenshots from like Google search. And you can see, like, I sent you damn near the entire comic.
Yeah.
And that's that's one of the panels, and it's not there.
So we're operating off the possibility that line may have already been censored.
Yep.
Which is wild. I'll have to do some research and see what's up with that. We gotta
find out what's going on, because that was one that when I showed, that was one that people went to first. They were like, "By Odin's fade."
And like the thing that it stuck out to me because I was like, Odin's fucking bald.
He's bald, yeah.
Like he has no fucking hair. He doesn't have a fade.
He has Tim's on though.
He does in fact have Tim's on, which is
he got them damn Tim's on. And you know what? You know what makes me mad about that? When I was growing up, dudes used to wear Tim's in the summertime on the beach. Like we would go out there to the beach, and motherfuckers is wearing Tim's in the sand.
Tim's in the sand.
It's dumb. It's the dumbest.
I'd be lying if I said I hadn't seen that before.
It's the dumbest shit ever.
So what I'm curious about is what kind of footwear does Loki have? They haven't shown his feet at all.
Let's see. Does he rock Tim's too? So
that's how you know he's a traitor to Asgard.
It might be Stacey Adams though. Or they might be Gators.
That's true.
They could be Gators.
Honestly, if he had Gator shoes, that'd be it would go with the aesthetic.
Looks like he would have Gators on.
Yeah, this comic is just filled with like really awful stereotypes.
Oh,
like a lot of really awful stereotypes.
It is. Like I need this, the audience that's listening to us now, I need you to find it. Even if you just Google search it and look at the panels that are available online, you just need to read it. Like reading it is
because the comic opens with Miles Morales rapping about like the origin of Yggdrasil in Brooklyn, and it's not a particularly compelling verse. It's not well crafted.
No.
And then he just says like really shitty, like really dated references to like older hip hop stuff. Like he says hammer time and he grabs the hammer. He's like flip it and reverse it. Like God. All eyes on me.
Yo, he jumped up on the table, y'all. He jumps on the table and says all eyes on me. Like it's God, it's so bad. It's so bad. But this just goes to show that Miles can be used for anything they want him to be used for. Like he doesn't represent really anything, so they can just put him into any position and make it. So I don't know. And this series of comics really defines Miles, because he can literally be anyone and blend into any situation. So he has no distinct personality. You couldn't take Peter Parker and blend him in to just about anything and add his swag to it. So it's, I don't know, Miles, they kind of did Miles dirty on this one. If they were going to represent Miles and try to make us like Miles, this was not the way to go at all.
So yeah, I can't find a good source for that panel. It's on Twitter, it's on Reddit, but I can't find it in the context of that page. I have a feeling we may have gotten got. I feel like that might have been created.
But still, that's one panel out of the 80,000 that we've seen here.
It's really weird to me because like the news articles that are talking about the outrage about the comic, they're specifically referencing that line. So something's fucky there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Racism's bad, y'all.
Dude.
It's not great.
Dude, it's bad. So Marvel Comics trips me out because they kind of got rid of the Mandarin as a villain.
Because he was a very, very racist caricature of an Asian person.
Yep. So they got rid of him, but we're going to have Asgard as a literal like inner city ghetto type of. Yeah. Like that's what we're going to do. So we can't have an actually pretty cool villain like Mandarin. I used to read Iron Man comics back in the day, and Mandarin, even though he was like
a caricature,
pretty much racist, the stuff that he did was pretty awesome. And Disney, they could have tapped that market because they had Shang-Chi, and they used to call Shang-Chi's dad the Mandarin.
Yep.
He was like, they named me after a fruit or whatever, but they could have used, like, he was badass.
Yeah.
Like if he was a villain in phase 1 through 3 at some point, my God, man, that would have been so dope. And they missed that opportunity because they were trying to not be racist, but they could have changed it so that he wasn't called the Mandarin, but we all knew what he was. They made Ben Kingsley play the Mandarin,
which honestly is a waste of both the Mandarin as a title and Ben Kingsley. Ben Kingsley's such a good fucking actor, and like, God bless him for showing up and getting a check for just dicking around and being Ben Kingsley. But
yeah,
dude.
They just trying not to be racist. They ended up being like, Marvel itself just ended up being like super racist.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because that feels like that's kind of Marvel's MO. Yeah. By trying to not be something, they become the worst possible version of that thing.
That's 100%.
I'm just going to go and take a little, another shot from the hip here. A Black Panther.
Yeah.
The movie, not the comics.
Yeah.
The Black Panther movie was a lot. It was a lot.
It really was. And the Black Panther movie, I cringe just thinking about it because I remember all that when it came out, and people that never watched comic movies before, they didn't see any movie before this, but the fact that it was a black hero, some people didn't even know that it was a black hero. They thought it was a movie about the Black Panther movement. And I'm like, did you even watch the trailer?
Holy shit.
Yes. And I'll never forget this. I was out with my family, and my dad likes to talk to everybody. So my dad told them that we went to see Black Panther, and they said, "Oh, did they show Malcolm?" Like, we were at a restaurant, and the waiter was like, "Oh, did they show Malcolm X in that particular one?" Because, you know, he was a big part of the Black Panther movement. And my mom was like, "The superhero? Malcolm X was in the superhero?" He was like, "What you talking about? We talk about Black Panther." Yes, we just saw T'Challa. So black people, poor things, they didn't even know what the fuck they were getting into. Some people really thought that it was a Black Panther movement movie. It blows my mind.
That's a Seinfeld sketch. Like, what you just described is literally a Seinfeld premise.
Dog.
Like, that just sounds like a Seinfeld episode.
And
what do you mean it's not about Malcolm X?
I'm wearing a Black Panther shirt at the time. Because I have a comic. I have 2 Black Panther shirts, and they're both the old school comic ones.
Yeah.
Because I don't I tell y'all this right now. I represent the old school comics. If there is a comic t-shirt, I'm wearing it. Like my Spider-Man shirt does not have anything to do with the movies. This is old school Spidey fighting old school Green Goblin. That's how I roll. So my shirt was super old. Like, you know, it even looks distressed and stuff. Like
Right.
that's the look that I want to have. And the dude still is just like, nah, man, I thought that was the one with, you know, Black Power, Malcolm X.
Does Samuel Jackson play himself as a 17-year-old getting arrested on the California campus?
It was amazing. And I read a couple articles at the time that movie came out that's a lot of people thought that. And when they got to the movie, they were like, yo, this isn't what I thought. And it's like, if you watch the trailer, they just heard the word
Black Panther
and they
which, to be fair, that's what I would think too.
But
if I didn't have the context,
time
right,
for that.
So I'm going to take a brief aside here and pass the microphone over to our extraordinarily quiet third party.
No, I was gonna say, so I've been trying to research the whole by Thor's fade. By Odin's fade. It might be from issue 5. Because issue 5 is where they all come together. So it's possible. Because I noticed the art style looked a little different. So that might be a possibility too. It's not necessarily that it was censored. It just might be from the next issue.
Okay. Okay. So the mystery might have been solved.
Good sleuthing.
Yes.
Our ace reporter.
Yes. Man. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on anymore, y'all. Like this is absolutely ridiculous on so many levels, but it's Miles Morales, man. It didn't need to come to this.
The questions that I was asking DV earlier today, because I think representation in all media is important. I think that people should have characters that they can relate to. However, I also have a saying that inclusion for the sake of inclusion is exclusion. And what that means to me is if you're creating and forcing characters to the forefront that have specific traits that you want to appeal to a market for, it's really not in service of the people you are attempting to give relatability to. It's in service of your pocket, of your wallet, but it's not about giving empowerment or a voice to a community. So the question I had for DV was, why did Miles Morales get created? Why does he exist? And I feel like we pretty much answered that. And even in the creator's own words, they were like, people felt like they couldn't relate to Spider-Man because he wasn't black, that's a matter of opinion, but in my opinion, it's categorically false. Spider-Man is a relatable hero because he's just a good guy. It has nothing to do with what race he is. He's just a good dude.
I see people of all races wearing a Spider-Man shirt or getting excited when they go to Universal Studios Island of Adventure and the Spider-Man's walking around. People like break their necks to get to Spider-Man, not because he's black. Like, I'm gonna be honest with y'all right now. If I went there and I saw Miles Morales and I did not see like Peter Parker Spider-Man, I would be pissed. Like Universal Studios had to give me my damn money back because I didn't come here to see Miles Morales. I came here to see Peter Parker, the real dude. He's the real G, yo. At least give me Ben Reilly. If you got to sub him out, give me Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly's pretty cool.
That's fair. I was just thinking, I had a sudden epiphany. I went to a lot of conventions and things before 2011. And I remember I saw a ton of Spider-Man. And it was in the community that I live in, it's a lot of black people, that are into anime and video games and things like that. So there were just like a ton of black dudes and ladies repping Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And
before Miles
even existed. I don't think that was a sufficient reason. Creating Miles, if he had an interesting concept, would be one thing.
I'll be fine with him.
But creating him without an interesting concept is another. And then on top of that, creating him without an interesting concept and then devaluing Peter Parker in the process, that's an entirely different beast. And I think that that's a really harmful trend that we're seeing in a lot of different types of media. It's something that you and I have talked about pretty extensively, and our mystery guest and myself have spoken about in some of the media that we enjoy. We both like to play a card game called Magic the Gathering. And there's a very famous controversy within Magic the Gathering. And again, Magic the Gathering, the stereotypical Magic player, when you think of them in your head, is going to be a straight white dude. That's just what was prevalent in the card game scene for a long time. Nowadays, it's a lot more inclusive. The culture has shifted considerably, but there's still a long way to go. One of the things that they did that caused a huge outrage. So the way that Magic the Gathering works, they'll release like a set of cards, and then sometimes they for a while they release stories on the website that go along with the events that you see on the cards. So the cards are telling a story, you read the story, you see between the lines.
Gotcha.
And there's a narrative that follows years and years of development. There's a character called Chandra. She's a fire mage, and there's a character called Nissa, and she's a nature mage. One's a human, one's an elf. And they're both part of basically a superhero team of people who can travel across the multiverse. Okay. And
America Chavez?
Better.
Okay.
Much better.
What?
Yeah.
I doubt that. America Chavez
I don't
is
like
the best.
I don't like Chandra as a character because I feel like she got way too much attention with not enough like cool personality traits.
America Chavez.
Her thing is that she's just mad all the time.
Oh, okay. America Chavez.
But even with that, I'd say that she has more depth to her than America Chavez.
Okay, I just want to keep saying America Chavez.
I don't blame you. Is this a Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness reference? That's going to be my new thing. But so anyways, you have these two characters who are diametrically opposed. Fire burns down forests. That's just a thing. So it ended up where Chandra has a lot of like anger issues, and this is a much older, mature like elf. So they end up commiserating, and Nissa kind of teaches Chandra how to get a handle on her emotions.
Okay.
Gives her a little bit of the green magic and is like, hey, like maybe just chill out a little bit. Maybe don't fly off the handle so much. And they start to develop what to everyone reading and everyone playing along was a very obvious woman-loving woman relationship. There was a lot of hinting. There was a lot of flirting. There was a lot of everything. Then it came to a head in the War of the Spark, which was like their end game, where it was all these different multiverse walking people all ending up on the same plane fighting to the death. Yeah. And in that, a very important character who's also a part of the superhero team sacrifices himself to save someone else and dies permanently, which is a huge deal in this universe for these kinds of characters.
That literally sounds like Endgame.
It literally
sounds
like
just like
it came out after. It came out after Endgame. It was about the same time as Endgame, but the storylines were incredibly similar. They released actual novels alongside this, and in that novel there are 2 lines that are written, and it says specifically, Chandra never liked girls. That's an actual line from the book. She actually loved the guy who died because he was a big, hunky, strong man.
Wow.
So they took, I want to say like 5 or 6 years of character development
and then
just like literally wrote it away with 2 lines of dialogue.
Good God.
And it wasn't even dialogue. It was like her internal monologue. God, they suffered so much backlash from that, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
it was fucked up how they presented.
Yes, yes.
Well, you want to know what they released this month?
It's Pride Month, so I could take a guess. I could take a guess of what they released this month. Oh no! Don't do it! Don't do it!
So, Magic the Gathering has a set of products called Secret Layers. And they're special drops of cards that are exclusive that you have to order from their website and that are limited edition. They're usually foil. They're usually a little bit more expensive, but you buy them as a package. They released a Pride secret layer. And so they're representing LGBTQIA plus characters. And so there's Raul Zarek and his husband, right? Cool. Alessia is a canonically trans character, right? No issues. Bearscape, which is just a funny thing. It's just a bunch of burly dudes.
that's a very hilarious picture right there.
Not only is that representative, but that's just a good meme. Like, that's fun.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good.
And then Collective Voyage. See, that's Chandra. No Nissa. There's no Nissa anywhere near her. There's no Nissa anywhere near her. Okay, but that's Chandra. But this next panel, on that same plane, oh wow, it's two lady characters that they made up loving each other, but they didn't want to take their flagship property and make, because that was like they were like the gatewatch, like this is the story you're following.
Yeah.
So instead they made up a lesbian couple and were like, these are the ones that get represented.
But that doesn't make any sense because they had an organic story already brewing. Everything is great when you do it organically.
Yeah, and for the record, it was organic. Nothing felt shoehorned about that connection. It made sense in the story. It made sense mechanically. Everything was fine until they shot themselves in the foot. But then they have the fucking audacity in Pride Month to release this.
Dog.
When they had the story of their flagship characters right there. Wouldn't have been a problem. This is actually the only thing I really like about this set. This is like a gay I Spy. And I'm not saying that in a derogative sense. A bunch of different types of sexualities are represented in these different pictures. So the handful of aces is asexual, that you commonly referred to as ace. You've got the pride flag. You've got, where are the other ones? There's a ton in here. I'm really not.
See, that's creative stuff, though.
Yeah. But like they got the trans flag, the pride flag. There's a bunch of like different things you could see here and be like, hey, like I'm represented in this thing. But again, it feels very hollow given what they have already done.
Yeah.
The fact that they destroyed their what was an incredibly organic and representative relationship, and that just tossed it away.
Yeah.
And that just feels like that's what happens.
That's what they do.
They love doing that.
Wow, I can't, like, they had these characters this whole time. Like, that was a slam dunk. That was a layup.
So these characters, Nissa's been around since like, I don't know, 2010, and Chandra was around even earlier than that because she was one of the first planeswalkers ever. She was the first red planeswalker that they ever printed in card form. Okay, so Chandra and Nissa. Yeah, so you can see it even right here. The top thing, queer erasure and magic. Nissa and Chandra's relationship was heavily implied and teased. They issue a public apology regarding alleged queer erasure.
Messed that up big time.
She was described as a heterosexual who likes big muscled manly men. That's a fucking quote from the goddamn book. Like they didn't just fuck it up. They fucked it up and then burned it and then pissed on it. Like there was no reason for it to be that disrespectful.
That is very disrespectful.
And they did it. And it's not the last time they'll do it.
Yeah.
There's ways that these characters can be brought together in a meaningful and organic way. But instead, they keep making side characters and making them fit the mold because they don't want to lose the marketability of the face of their game.
And see, Disney and Marvel, they're doing the opposite.
They're trying to force people onto the face rather than allowing those relationships to grow organically.
Like I remember when Iceman, when they made Iceman come out, and like he was one of the first ones that they converted, you know, they just changed, retconned everything that he's done before, all relationships and chicks that he's banged, all that stuff that we've been reading. They said, you know what? Nope.
He's gay now.
Yeah, he's gay. So that was the first one of the first big ones that I remember. And that's what Disney and Marvel do. They they do the exact opposite. They take the faces of their company and then they just like, nope, we're going to retcon all that stuff and make it this way. Damn, I didn't know that about Magic the Gathering though. That's huge.
It's fucking massive. Like there's people who I know in real life who are very good friends of mine who are trans and who are bisexual, lesbian, gay. And they like Magic the Gathering, but this is the one thing that they're just like, they always point back to and like, this was fucked up. this was genuinely like 5 or 6 years of character development.
That's so
that they just like, they like teased it, and then wrote a line that says she's only interested in big muscled manly men.
So jacked up. Oh my God.
That's Hasbro. That's what happens.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
So yeah, that's something that the mystery guest and I talk about pretty frequently when we talk about Magic the Gathering, is like they've had all these wonderful opportunities to bring representation to the fore, and instead they stomp it out of existence and then shoehorn in much less genuine experiences that are very clearly like marketing cash grabs, like the whole the Pride secret lair that they have there. That's a cash grab. Like it's pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. Like when they for like the Latin month, they put Miles on.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing about.
And they do it for Black History Month too. They put Miles on it. Yep. So Miles can just oh, we got two demographics, baby. It's like
so fucking funny.
It is, man. It is. One thing I wanted to say about last thing I want to say about Miles. With Miles, I feel like instead of creating a new Spider-Man, why don't they just bring some of the other Black characters to the forefront? Like let's get some big Luke Cage stuff going on. Let's get him back into the fray. Let's get Blade back into the fray.
Blade needs to come back.
Blade needs to be like Blade is an amazing character.
He's so good.
So like, okay, so you made Falcon Captain America for a spell.
For about 3 seconds.
So and here's another thing too. As a Black man, I don't need you to take existing white characters and make them Black. That doesn't make me like them anymore. Like Cap was cool with me. I didn't like Cap as much because in the comics he talked a lot of shit to Spider-Man because he's a kid. And, you know, he's like 1,000 years old. So he used to talk shit to Spider-Man a lot.
And canonically, Captain America's favorite time period to live in is the Jim Crow era.
Yes. So he probably would fucking hate Miles Morales. He would hate Miles Morales.
Who's this fucking
he just mixed race too.
Yeah.
And he gets oh my god.
Yeah. Captain America's sitting there just having an aneurysm.
So they didn't, instead of just like bringing these characters that we know and love, because like Luke Cage, so people sleep on Luke Cage because a lot of people don't know a lot about him besides his TV show.
Right.
But Luke Cage was one of the characters that was like big in the Black Revolution. So like when the civil rights and everything was happening.
Oh,
okay,
Luke Cage was like, he was like the Cap. Like when everybody was like against Nazis and stuff, and you know how they created Cap.
Yeah.
Luke Cage was like that dude.
Okay.
And you know, he had the fro, he was strong. So his character was cool because they made him like his skin, you can't penetrate his skin. And back then, all the people were getting beaten and hosed down, and you know, dogs after him, and police brutality. But they made Luke, he could take all of that and still stand strong. So he was pretty much how they wanted Black America to stand and be strong. That's what Luke Cage represented. And instead of bringing his ass up to where we are now, when we have police brutality and all this stuff going on and protests, instead of bringing Luke Cage back up to the forefront and putting him in stuff, he's already been doing it for years. They make Miles Morales. And they take the world's most popular superhero, rebrand him, and now they automatically deem him as popular because he's piggybacking off of the name that it pisses me off so much.
So what injustices does Miles Morales combat? What does he stand for?
I mean, them Jordans. You waiting in line on a Saturday for them Jordans? He's out there. Mm-hmm. His mama ain't got 2 nickels to rub together. They living in a broke down little shack. But he's out there getting them J's though. So do you stereotypical right there, bruh.
Do you think Peter Parker would have stood in line for an iPhone release with the amount of money that they had coming in?
Have you seen Peter Parker's phone? Like that shit is cracked the hell up. And I thank you for doing this. What's his name? Webb, the director of the Spider-Man movies. But anyway, Mark Webb.
Mark Webb.
So he represent, like, he showed Peter on his phone, and that shit was always cracked up, always busted to hell. The only time it wasn't was in No Way Home when he was talking to MJ. Actually, I think it did have a crack in it? I think it did have a crack in it when he was talking to MJ via voice chat, video chat. I think it did have a crack in it then. He will never have a beautiful phone. He won't.
Yeah.
That's not his. He's not thinking of that. He's not thinking of it. He's not saying, you know what, dude, I need to be out there with the freshest J's. Parker is glad to be alive in a lot of situations. He's out there trying to protect his aunt. He's trying to make sure MJ is straight. But and Gwen, when he was with Gwen back in the day, like he's not worried about that. But
when her vertebrae were all relatively aligned.
Yes, before she folded up
like a chair.
They take those features, like they take the stereotypical stuff that they say that black men have, like they love their cars and their rims and their Timbs and their Jordans, and they just shove it onto Miles and put it out there. Like, we need to do better. Like, we could do better than that. If as a kid reading that, I would be like, yo, Mom, I want some Jordans. And then I would become that type. That's not what you want to put out for young black youth to read. If you're trying to make Miles a beacon,
role model.
Yeah, a beacon of hope for the black community. That's not how you do it.
It does feel pretty counterintuitive to romanticize the things that you deem are problematic within a culture.
Yeah, like Into the Spider-Verse, I do love that movie though, don't get me wrong, but Into the Spider-Verse, they're telling people like, hey, go spray graffiti on random shit. Like, you remember how Uncle Aaron took him down into the little thing and they were practicing doing graffiti?
Yeah.
It's like, it's okay to do that, but don't make it like Miles is the epitome of black culture. Like, he represents everybody and this is how we all are. That is not fair. And Parker, I like Parker because they don't really show him doing anything deemed super white. You know what I'm saying? I
know exactly.
Stereotypically white. Yes. They don't have Parker doing any of that stuff. He's just a dude.
He's just a guy.
Just a fucking dude, man. The only thing I will say that Parker does when they show them doing dinner, like having dinner, he does eat typically white foods. Sure. You know, like what they would deem white. He's not eating like pork chops and soul food. Right. That's fine. But he isn't, like, his character isn't stereotypically straight white bread, mayonnaise white. Yes. He is a mixture of all of us. Yeah. And that's what makes Parker so dope.
He's a genuine everyman.
Yep.
There's no pretense to his character. It's just he's a person. Yep. And it feels like Miles Morales is a caricature of a person, but in the direction that you don't want someone to emulate. And yet that's what you're propping up as your example for blackness. Yeah.
Like I said, the best representations were Into the Spider-Verse minus a few little things, and then the video game. Like, because he was like super regular in the video game. Like, he almost could have been, like, they could have switched him out for a white dude and you probably wouldn't even pay attention to it.
And I think that like Spider-Man, that's kind of like the point. It doesn't really matter. The emphasis is not on the race. The emphasis is on the character. Yep. And not like, hey, Peter Parker, like, no, like your integrity as a person. Like that's what being Spider-Man is about. That's literally the fucking tagline. Yep. With great power comes great responsibility. It's about personal responsibility and accountability.
Yep. So Miles, y'all, I mean, y'all can have him. I mean, I do like certain things that he's in, but as a character as a whole, nah, I'm good.
It feels like a disingenuous representation.
Not necessary. Parker is still number one.
So you're saying that Peter Parker is superior?
He actually had a superior Spider-Man comic, yes.
Racially.
I mean, look, I'm defending Peter Parker till I'm gone. from this earth.
Fair enough.
So, yes, superior. My spider overlord.
Right.
That's my man's.
That's about everything that I have.
Yeah,
I think we've run the gamut, and I think we've done it in a pretty reasonable way.
Yeah,
This feels good.
I think this is it.
Do we have any closing words from our mystery spectator?
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think there are so many great examples of representation in media, and particularly with this what if Miles Morales was Thor, it could have been a great telling. It could have. It had potential. I think, for instance, we were talking about the Hulk one before we started filming, and how they tackled some good issues in there. And in just Thor, it's just I remember I couldn't even get past the first panel. Just seeing all the 10 issues hanging up on the line, like, this could not be more stereotypical if they tried. And I feel like they tried, unfortunately. I hope this serves as a good example of what not to do. And moving forward, because Marvel has good examples of pulling in diversity, not just into, their Pride Month issue or into their Black History Month issue. They have diversity with their writers, with their artists, with their colorists, like, more than they have in the past, for sure. So I think this was just a bad example. Like, absolutely bad example, and, they should have known. They should have. They know better.
Well, if you're operating off the assumption that any publicity is good publicity, some marketing guy is getting sucked off by 3 Swedish supermodels right now for that fucking idea. That's 100% what's happening.
Oh my goodness. I just couldn't believe it. I had to send it to y'all.
I'm glad you did. And I'm glad we had this conversation.
Yeah. This was good. This is good. I was telling him before, I was telling Connor earlier today that I had to get this off my chest. I've been holding this Miles Morales thing in since he came out. And the reason I never really expressed it to anybody, because I'm always like, I would always be deemed as a hater. Like, you don't like your own culture and this and that. That is not the case. That is not the case. They're not doing Peter Parker right by introducing someone with the same shit and then pushing him to the side. So, I don't know. Miles, he's all right, I guess. Y'all can have him. I'm not going to buy any of his stuff. The stuff that I did read was digital. So, and I don't have that service anymore. So I just stopped caring. So thank you for letting me vent this out.
I'm happy to let you do it. And by let you do it, that weirdly sounds like I'm giving you permission. That's absolutely not the impression I'm trying to give. I'm happy that we have a way for you to get that opinion across in a meaningful, helpful way.
Just like our Elden Ring episode.
Just like the Elden Ring episode.
Like, I was excited for you to go through and say your piece on that.
I'm happy to make that a multi-part series where every other week we talk shit about Elden Ring and how cool Dark Souls 2 is. Well, I think that's everything we've covered. Thank you all so much for joining us for episode 5 of the Circles of Trust podcast. As always, we'll see you next week.
All right. Peace out.